The gate was nearly empty when I reached her. Rows of black seats, sunlight pouring straight through the tall glass, a jet parked out on the taxiway like it had all the time in the world. She held her bag against her chest with both arms, her phone still trapped in one hand, and she gripped the leather strap so hard the seam gave a small creak. Behind me, the speaker announced the final boarding group. She could barely get the words out. My mother is dying, and I can't afford a ticket. I lifted the 2 passes so she could see them both. We'll go together, I said. My name is Adam Fletcher. I was 33 that winter, an airline captain based out of Denver, and if you had asked me a year earlier who I was, I would have answered with the job first, the way most people say their own name. That was the whole trouble, really. I lived alone in a narrow house on the east side of town. I had been married once, and it had ended 2 years back, with no children and no wreckage anybody would have wanted to watch, just 2 people who had quietly stopped walking the same direction. I was fine with the quiet. I told myself I preferred it. Then, in January, a truck lost its grip on a sheet of black ice, and I lost most of the next few months. I remember the sound more than the impact, the flat, wrong crunch of metal, and then the world going very slow and very white. When it stopped, my left shoulder and my right leg were not where I had left them. There were 2 surgeries. There were pins I could feel when the weather turned, and there was a sentence from the flight surgeon that landed harder than any of it. Grounded, indefinitely, until you can prove otherwise. For a man who had measured his own worth in altitude, that word sat on my chest like a second injury, and it did not heal on any schedule the doctors could promise me. They sent me home with a brace on my shoulder that clicked every time I moved, a chart of exercises I could not do, and instructions to accept a visiting nurse. I fought that last part the hardest. I had spent my whole life being the one people counted on to stay calm at 30,000 feet, the steady voice in the headset that got a plane full of strangers safely down through weather. Now I couldn't tie my own shoe. There is a particular shame in that, the kind that makes a proud man rude to the very people trying to help him, and I was not proud of the man I was in those first weeks. The nursing agency sent someone on a Tuesday afternoon. I heard the doorbell, and I heard myself grumble at it, and then Julia Hayes walked into my front room, and something in the air changed in a way I couldn't have explained if you had paid me. She was calm in a way that wasn't performance. Steady hands. A voice that didn't rise or fuss. She set her bag down, took one look at me trying to lever myself out of a chair I had no business fighting, and she didn't rush over to save me. She just waited until I ran out of stubbornness, which did not take as long as I would have liked. You don't have to like the wheelchair, she said. You just have to not fight the ramp. I wanted to argue. I was ready to, but there was something in her face I couldn't place, a familiarity that had no address, like a song you know every word to without remembering where you first heard it. I told myself I was tired. I told myself the painkillers were doing that. I let it go. Looking back now, I know she had seen my name on the assignment sheet before she ever rang my bell, and that she had asked for my case on purpose. I know she recognized the name, the way you recognize your own street in the dark, but I didn't know any of that yet. That afternoon she was simply the nurse the agency sent, and I was simply a difficult man learning, one clumsy exercise at a time, that being taken care of was not the same thing as being weak. The house smelled of antiseptic and the cold coffee I kept forgetting on the windowsill. My brace clicked with every rotation of my arm. The Denver afternoon light came in long and gold across the wood floor, and she worked in it patiently, moving my bad arm through a range it did not want to go, counting under her breath, never once making me feel like a burden for needing her there. It would take me a long time to understand how wrong I was about almost everything that winter, and a good deal longer to understand how much longer than that she had already been waiting. After that, the weeks fell into a rhythm, and the rhythm quietly became the best part of my days. She came 3 times a week, then more, and she always came on time, but she started staying longer than the agency paid her to. 15 minutes here, half an hour there, always with a good clinical reason on her lips, always one more set, one more measurement, one more slow walk down the hall, while I leaned on her and pretended I didn't need to. I began to notice that I was listening for the doorbell, that I shaved on the days she came, that the house felt smaller and warmer when her bag was on my table, and too big and too quiet when it wasn't. I am a private man by habit, but she was easy to talk to in the way that steady people are, and so I talked. I told her about flying. I told her the things pilots don't usually say out loud, that the job is mostly waiting and weather and paperwork, and then, for a few minutes on either end, it is the most important thing in the world. I told her about the first time I brought a full airplane down through a storm into Denver, hands sweating on the yoke, 150 people behind me who had no idea how thin the margins were, and how the wheels touched and nobody clapped because nobody knew, and how that had felt better than applause ever could. I told her about the passengers too, about how you carry them without ever meeting them, how, on the worst nights, you can feel the weight of every single person back there trusting you to be better than the storm, and how that weight is the closest thing to prayer I have ever known. Most people nod at that and change the subject. She did not change the subject. She listened to those stories the way most people don't, not politely, not waiting for her turn. She listened like she already understood exactly what it meant to sit in the back of a plane and put your whole life in the hands of a stranger up front, like she had done it once and never once forgotten it. There was a rhythm to the quiet between us, too, and I came to love it more than the talking. She learned how I took my coffee without me telling her, and started fixing it right. Black with too much sugar, the way my grandfather drank it. She never filled a silence just to be filling it. When neither of us had anything to say, we simply didn't say anything, and it never once felt like distance. It felt like two people who could sit in the same weather without either of them needing to comment on the sky. "Do you ever get scared up there?" she asked me one afternoon. "Only on the ground," I said, and I laughed, except it came out too honest, and I didn't know why it was true. There were things about her I catalogued without meaning to. The way she said the same 3 words at the start of every walking exercise, left foot leads. Trust the rail, quiet and even, like a runway call-out, like she had said it to herself 1,000 times before she ever said it to me. The way she squared everything on my kitchen counter into straight lines, the way she never talked about herself unless I asked twice, and even then answered in the smallest true words she could find. And there was the book. On her breaks, she read a paperback so soft and creased it had gone the texture of cloth, the spine gone white with folds. She kept her place in it with a bookmark, and one afternoon while she stepped into the kitchen for water, I saw what the bookmark was. It was a boarding pass. An old one, worn thin at the edges, the print faded to almost nothing. I only saw it for a second before she came back and the book closed around it again, but it stayed with me. A nurse who read on her breaks and marked her page with an old boarding pass. I told myself people keep strange things. I told myself it was none of my business. I did not ask. The audience of my own memory can see it now, all of it, laid out plain. Every single time I mentioned flying, something in her went still, not sad, not tense, just still, the way you go still when someone brushes up against a door you keep closed. She knew exactly what a boarding pass could mean to a person, because she was carrying one that had meant everything to her. She wasn't listening to my flying stories out of politeness. She was listening because she already knew the ending of a story I hadn't yet figured out I was standing in. But at the time, all I saw was a good woman being good at her job, and I thought I was lucky the agency had sent me someone so easy to be around. Once, I got close to the truth without knowing it. We were in the hallway, my arm across her shoulders for balance, her hand steady at my ribs, and I stopped mid-step and looked at her, and the question came out before I could stop it. "Have we met before?" "Somewhere?" For half a second, everything in her paused. Her hand tightened just slightly against my side, then eased, and then she gave a small, quick smile and looked down at my feet. "Left foot leads," she said. You're overthinking the rail." And we kept walking, and the moment closed like water over a stone, and I let it, because I was a man who had spent his whole life reading instruments and had somehow never learned to read the one thing standing right beside me. The strange part is how happy those weeks were. My shoulder was healing wrong and then right. My leg came back to me one stubborn degree at a time. Outside the window, it rained the slow gray Denver rain that goes on for days. And inside, there was the tick of the little timer she used to pace my sets, and the rustle of her turning a page, and the corner of that soft old ticket peeking out from between the leaves of her book. I did not know I was falling. I only knew that the days she came were good, and the days she didn't were long, and that I had started, without ever deciding to build my whole week around a woman I was paying to leave. I want to be honest about something, because this is the part I am least proud of and most grateful for. I had convinced myself, in the 2 years since my marriage ended, that I was done with all of it, that whatever door in a person opens toward another person had quietly closed in me, and I was better off for it. I had made a small, careful, solitary life, and I had called it peace. And this quiet woman with the steady hands and the worn-out book walked into it 3 times a week and, without ever raising her voice, without ever asking me for a single thing, opened that door back up so gently that I never once felt the hinge move. By the end of February, I knew I was in trouble, not the kind you avoid, the kind you quietly hope lasts. I caught myself planning conversations I would have with her. I caught myself wanting to tell her the true things, the ones I had not said to anyone since before the divorce. I had not held a woman's hand in longer than I would admit out loud, and here I was, letting one hold me up down my own hallway and calling it therapy. I never once wondered why she had chosen my case. It never crossed my mind that a nurse could ask for a patient, or that anyone would ever ask for me. I thought the good thing happening to me was an accident, the one lucky thing to come out of a season of nothing but bad luck. I had no idea it was the exact opposite of an accident. I had no idea she had been steering toward my front door, patiently, for 8 years. The good weeks ended the way good weeks in my life usually did. Somebody from the past walked back in through a door I had forgotten to lock. Her name is Paige. We had been married for 4 years and divorced for 2, and in all that time she had never once come to my door, not until she heard I had been hurt. I don't say that to be cruel, I say it because it is the shape of her. Paige arrives where the story is. She has a talent for showing up at exactly the moment there is something to be gotten. She came in loud, the way she does everything, filling my quiet house with a concern so large and so bright that it took me a full day to notice it never actually touched me. She fluffed pillows I had not asked her to fluff. She rearranged my kitchen so that I could not find a single glass. She told 3 different neighbors, in a voice built to carry over fences, how she had dropped everything to come take care of poor Adam. And somewhere in the second afternoon, gently, casually, folded neatly inside a sentence about how worried she was, she asked about the settlement, whether the claim against the trucking company would come to anything, whether there would be a number, whether I had thought yet about who I would want handling that kind of money, and whether that person ought to be someone who really understood me. I had been married to her. I knew the exact sound of the real question hiding under the kind one. I had spent 4 years learning to hear it, but I was lonely and healing and, God help me, a little grateful for the noise in a house that had been silent for weeks, and so I let her stay longer than I should have. And that is how she and Julia ended up under the same roof at the same time. One of them measuring my recovery in careful degrees, the other measuring it in dollars, and me, in the middle, too grateful for company to tell the difference yet. Paige saw it immediately. She saw it before I would let myself see it. She watched Julia move through my rooms like she belonged in them, watched me watch her, watched the way the whole house softened when the doorbell rang, and something in Paige went hard and calculating behind the smile. A woman who arrives where the value is does not like to walk in and find someone already standing there. She started asking Julia questions. Not in front of me at first. I only learned that part later, and learning it was its own small heartbreak. Little questions in the kitchen, little questions in the hall while I did my sets. Where are you from? How long have you been a nurse? How, exactly, did you come to be working with Adam, of all the patients in this city? And Julia, who I would come to understand could not make herself lie even to save her own skin, answered every one of them plainly, because lying was a thing she simply did not have in her. Then Paige brought it to me, and she did it the way she did everything, out loud, in the middle of the front room, loud enough for the neighbors. Ask her, Adam, she said, and she was almost laughing, the triumphant laugh of a person holding a card she knows beats yours. Go on, ask her if she requested you. I looked at Julia. She had a therapy band in her hands, the blue one we used for my shoulder, and I said, Did you? Julia set the band down on the table. She folded it once, carefully, the way she folded everything, buying herself 1 second and no more. And she said, Yes, that was the whole answer. One word. And God help me, I only heard the word. I did not hear the 8 years buried underneath it. I did not hear the reason. I heard yes, and my mind, which had spent a lifetime trusting instruments and distrusting luck, did the cruelest arithmetic it knew how to do. Paige poured the rest in before I could think. She was good at this. She found the true thing, and she bent it patiently until it pointed the wrong way. She is not some nurse who happened to get assigned to you, she said. She asked for you. She hunted you down. Think about it, Adam. A man fresh out of surgery, alone, grounded, grateful for any warm thing that walks in the door. Do you know how easy you are right now? Do you have any idea how easy you would be to steer? She let it sit in the air where it could do the most damage. People don't ask for a stranger, they ask for a target. And here is the thing I have to live with. It worked. Not because Paige was clever, though she was. It worked because it landed on the exact fault line I had been hiding my whole life. The quiet, buried belief that good things do not happen to me on purpose, that if something warm walks into my house, it must be after something, that a woman like Julia could not possibly have crossed a room toward me unless there was a reason with my name and my money written all over it. Paige did not build that fault line. She just knew precisely where it was, and she stepped on it. I got cold. I felt it happen, and I could not stop it. The shutter coming down, the captain's voice taking over, flat and even and final. The voice I used for the worst weather. I told Julia I thought the agency should send someone else. I said it the way I would reassign a route, like it was procedure, like it cost me nothing. I watched the words land on her, and I told myself I was being smart. I told myself I was protecting myself from something. She did not argue. That is the part that undid me later, when I finally understood. A person who was guilty of what Paige had accused her of would have fought, would have explained or spun it or begged. Julia did none of it. Her fingers found the hem of her sleeve and tightened there, once, and then let go. She went very still. The same stillness that came over her every time I talked about flying, and I mistook the stillness for a confession instead of the thing it actually was. She gathered her bag. She lined up my medications on the counter in their straight, careful rows one last time, out of habit, out of care, even then, even leaving. And at the door she stopped and said the only thing she said in her own defense, which was not a defense at all. I never wanted anything from you that you would have to be tricked into giving. Then she left. The door closed behind her, quiet, no slam, and the house went straight back to the exact size it had been before her, and Paige exhaled like a woman who had won something, and started talking about lawyers, and I sat in my chair in the last of the gold Denver light and told myself I had just done something wise. I had never in my life been more wrong about anything, and I had a whole long empty week ahead of me to begin figuring that out. She was gone 8 days. I counted every one of them, which should have told me everything I was refusing to know. On the 9th day my phone rang, and it was not her. It was the agency, calling to confirm the transfer of my case, some scheduling thing, and the coordinator, not thinking, mentioned that Nurse Hayes had asked to keep working through a family emergency but might need coverage, because her mother had taken a turn. Savannah, she said. The nurse's mother was down in Savannah, and it was not looking good. I do not remember deciding to get in the car. I remember that I could suddenly drive, that the leg had come back enough, that the flight surgeon had cleared me the week before to travel as a passenger even if not yet to fly. I remember the airport. I remember finding her at the gate because I knew, without a single person telling me, that a woman who could not afford to lose someone would go straight to the one place that could carry her to them and stand there hoping it would be enough. She was at the counter when I came through, and the agent was shaking her head, and Julia's card was in her hand. I would learn the rest in pieces over the next few hours, that she had been quietly covering her mother's care back home for months, that there was almost nothing left, that the only same-day seat to Georgia was a last-minute fare with a number on it that made the agent wince, and that her card had been declined right there in front of the whole line. She was not making a scene. She was just standing very straight, holding her bag against her chest, trying to figure out how to cross a country she could not afford to cross, to reach a mother who was running out of time. I went to the counter, and I bought 2 seats. I found her in the empty gate area with the sun pouring through the glass and a jet sitting out on the taxiway. And behind me the speaker called the final boarding group, and she could barely get the words out. My mother is dying, and I can't afford a ticket. And I lifted the 2 passes so she could see them both, and I said, "We'll go together." She looked at the passes, and then she did something I did not expect. She reached into the book she carried everywhere, the soft one, the one worn to cloth, and she took out the bookmark and she put it into my hand. It was a boarding pass. 8 years old, thin as tissue, the print nearly gone. But in the corner, in my own handwriting, in blue ink faded almost to gray, were 4 words I had forgotten I ever wrote. "You'll make it, dash. A. You gave me this 8 years ago," she said, and her voice was steady, the way steady costs a person something. I was 19. My father was dying back home in Savannah, and I was stranded here at this airport with a ticket I could not change and no money to fix it, and I was going to miss him. And a young pilot I had never met gave up his seat and covered the difference, and wrote this on my pass, and told me I would make it. She pressed her lips together and made herself go on. I did make it. I got to say goodbye to my father because of you. I have carried this every day for 8 years. The speaker called our group again. I did not move. I stood in the middle of that airport and read 4 words I had written to a frightened stranger almost a decade before, and the floor of everything I thought I knew about myself shifted under my feet. "So, when your name came across my desk," she said, "I did not take the case by accident. I took it because I never got to say thank you." That is the whole crime Paige could not stop talking about. That is what I did. I found the man who once made sure a scared girl got home in time, and I asked to be the one who helped him learn to walk again. I thought about the stillness I had mistaken for guilt. I thought about the line she said at my door, that she never wanted anything I would have to be tricked into giving. I thought about 8 empty days and the exact shape of the woman who had filled that house before them, and I understood, at last, the thing the audience of my own life had seen the entire time while I missed it, that she had used one true reason, the case, to carry a second true reason she had no right to say out loud to a patient. The concealment was never a con. It was just decency, keeping its head down. For 8 years, she had held the one thing I would have said I was proudest of, if I had remembered doing it at all, and she had never once used it to ask me for anything, not for gratitude, not even for my attention. She had simply come to give back what she could, quietly, in the only language she trusted, which was care. And I had let a louder voice convince me that kindness, that patient had to be a trap. Then let me say it back to you, I said, and I closed her hand around the old pass and kept mine over it. We'll go together. Paige, and her lawyers, and her settlement, were all somewhere behind me in Denver, and I let go of every last bit of it standing right there, without a word, the way you finally set down something you should never have picked up. Then we walked onto the airplane, the two of us, 8 years late, and exactly on time. We made it to Savannah in time. That one sentence is the whole reason I can tell this story without coming apart. Her mother was in a quiet room with the blinds half drawn and the warm coastal light coming through in bars across the bed, and she was small under the blanket, but she was there, and she was awake, and she knew her daughter's face. Julia went to her and took her hand, and the two of them spoke low, the way people speak when there is not much time left and every word has to earn its place. I stood back at the door where I belonged, a stranger at the edge of a family's last chapter. But at some point, the old woman looked past her daughter and found me, and Julia said, simply, "Mama, this is Adam." And her mother studied me for a long moment with the clear, unhurried gaze of a person who has stopped wasting time on anything but the truth. And then she nodded, once, as if something she had wondered about for years had finally been answered. "The pilot," she said. She knew the story, too. Of course she did. Julia had carried it home to her 8 years before. She passed 2 days later, in the early morning, with her daughter's hand in hers and no struggle in it at all. Gentle, at peace, the way you pray the people you love get to go, and so rarely do. Julia sat with her a long while afterward and did not make a sound. She just held the hand that had once held hers first, and when she finally stood, she squared her shoulders the way she squared everything, and she was steady. Grief, on her, looked like stillness. I could read her now. I stayed close, and I said nothing, and I let her lean, and this time I got to be the rail. We buried her mother on a Tuesday, in a small church with white clapboard walls and a live oak out front so old that its branches touched the ground. Nobody in that church knew that the man standing beside Julia had only been part of her life, out loud, for 4 days. It did not feel like 4 days. It did not feel new at all. It felt overdue, like a homecoming I had been putting off for years without ever knowing the address. Then came the part nobody tells you about, the after. The long, plain, unglamorous after that is where a life actually gets built. We went back to Denver. Not into some sudden romance with a soundtrack swelling behind it, but into something slower and far better and far more real than that. She had a life to put back together, and I had a body to rebuild and a career to fight my way back into, and we did both of those hard things side by side, without hurrying either one. Months went by. My shoulder came all the way home. My leg finally stopped arguing with the weather. I did the medical, and I did the check rides, and on a bright, cold morning, almost a year to the day after the ice took everything from me, they gave me back my wings. The first day I flew again, she came to the airport with me. She walked me as far as she was allowed, to the mouth of the security line, and there she stopped, because that was as far as she could go. She did not hold on. She did not make it heavy or hard. She just looked at me and nodded. Once, the very same nod her mother had given me in that quiet room, the nod that says I know exactly who you are and I am not the least bit worried about you. I went through, and I turned back one time, and she was still standing there, watching, steady as a runway light. And I understood something in that moment. In my uniform for the first time in a year, for my whole life I had been the one who leaves, the one in the front of the plane, the one who is trusted to come back. Now, for the first time, there was someone at the gate who would still be there when I did. I flew the route. I brought the airplane down through a clean sky into Denver, and the wheels touched, and nobody clapped, and it was still the best feeling in the entire world. Only now it was no longer the only one, because she was there in the terminal waiting, and we drove home together. There was no single day it turned into love, and that is exactly how I knew it was real. It was not a lightning strike. It was the slow, patient work of two careful people who had each spent a long time being alone, deciding, morning by ordinary morning, to stop. She moved a few of her things into the house, then a few more, and one day I realized her worn paperback lived on my nightstand now, and I could not remember the house without it. We were not in a hurry. We had already, in a way neither of us fully understood at first, waited 8 years to get here. A few more slow seasons felt like nothing at all. That became the shape of us. I fly, and I come back, and she is there. And every single trip we take together, every visit back to Savannah to sit under that live oak, every ordinary flight just to go and see the country from the good seats, I do the same small thing. I keep the stubs, both of them, hers and mine, every single time. There is a shoebox on a shelf in the house we share now, and it is filling up, 2 stubs from every trip we have ever taken side by side, dozens of them, going back well over a year. And on the very top, always on top, is one soft old boarding pass worn thin as tissue, more than 8 years old now, with 4 words in faded blue ink in the corner in my own hand. You'll make it. A. She was right to keep it all those years. It turned out to be a promise I had made to her long before I ever knew her name, and it took me 8 years and a sheet of black ice to finally understand that I had been keeping it the whole time. Sometimes, on a layover, I catch myself writing something small on the corner of a stranger's boarding pass when they look frightened at the gate. A word or two. You'll make it. I never sign it anymore. I have learned that you do not get to know where a kindness lands, or when, or in whose worn book it ends up waiting. Going together stopped being a thing, I said to her once in an airport. It became the thing we do. I have had a long time now to think about what happened to me, and this is what I keep coming back to. The loudest person in my life took the truth and tried to use it as a weapon. Paige found the realest, most tender fact in that whole house, that a quiet woman had loved me enough to come and find me, and she bent it into something ugly and predatory, and for a few cold days I let her, because it was easier to believe I was a target than to believe I was, finally, wanted. And the quietest person in my life took that very same truth and used it the opposite way. Not to take a single thing, just to stay. That is what I want you to carry out of this. The same fact can be a knife or an open hand, depending entirely on who is holding it. Listen for who is raising their voice and who is just quietly, steadily, still there. And here is the other thing, the one that still stops me some nights. A small kindness you hand a stranger does not simply disappear. Sometimes it goes up and circles and stays in the air for 8 years and comes back to land in your life at the exact moment you need it most, wearing a face you do not recognize until she hands you back your own handwriting. I spent years being the calm voice that gets strangers home. I never knew that one of those strangers had been quietly finding her way back to me the whole time. So let me ask you this. If a small kindness you had forgotten came back to you years later, would you even recognize it? And that night, in my living room, would you have believed her? Or would you have listened to the loud voice in the room? If this one stayed with you, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments who stayed for you when the loud ones left.